Hi everyone, welcome this evening to our book launch. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited that we're together to launch Rebecca Goss. Latch. It's called Latch, which sounds like launch. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited, as you can tell. I can't get my words out. So I will be as quick as possible, just going over the housekeeping. It's cool that there are so many of you here and saying hi in the chat. Please keep your messages coming. I can't believe there's someone in Australia. Wow, what time is it there? That's really exciting. I'm just going to run over what's happening, and then I'm going to hand over to Caroline Bird, who is also here, which is just as exciting as Rebecca being here. She is also a Carcanet poet. Her selected poems came out last year. That's called Rookie. I'm putting that in the chat for you now. Check her out. I'm going to hand over to Caroline in a moment, and later on in the event, Rebecca is going to read some poems for us. I want you to be aware that while Rebecca's reading, I'm going to have the text on screen, but you're still in control of your own screen. So if you need to change the layout of it and have Rebecca bigger and the text smaller, just have a play around, and you should be able to reconfigure it to suit any needs that you have yourself. Any technical questions about Zoom or whatever's going on, please drop them in the chat and I'll do whatever I can to help you while we're going through this hour's event. As I mentioned, Caroline is here. She is going to chat with Rebecca after the reading about the new poetry and the book. And there will also be time towards the end of the event for you to ask your own audience questions. So as well as finding the chat box, please find the other button, which says Q&A. And if you guys get your questions for Rebecca lined up in the Q&A box, then Caroline can put them to her later on in the event. So we really appreciate you paying £2 to be here. And you will get a discount code to buy your copy of the book. I've put that in the chat already, but it will also come as an email tomorrow. So don't worry about doing that now. You can just sit back and relax, listen to some poetry. Because I am going to hand over to Caroline Bird, who is a poet and also a playwright. Her sixth collection, The Air Year, won the Forward Prize for Best Collection in 2020, and it was also shortlisted for the Polari Prize and the Costa Prize. She's won many other prestigious awards, including as a playwright being shortlisted for the George Devine Award and the Susan Smith Blackburn Prize. So if you don't know Caroline's work, please do go to our website and buy a couple of her books as well. But for now, I'm very pleased to invite her on screen to join me so that we can get going.
Hello everyone. So I'm going to start with an abridged account of Rebecca's wonders. So her first collection, The Atomy of Structures, came out in 2010. Her second collection, Her Birth, was shortlisted for the Forward Prize and the Warwick Prize and the Portico Prize and won the East Anglican Book Award, which her third collection, Girl, was also shortlisted for. Most recently, she won the Sylvia Plath Prize for her poem When It Feels Hot, That Rage Against Me, which I know she's going to read tonight, which brings me seamlessly on to this wonder of a book. So, all right. Adrian Rich once said that the moment of change is the only poem, which is one of my favorite quotes because I never know exactly what it means, but I feel it coursing through this book. The moment of change, that latch lifting, which is all the more remarkable because this book is a study in the act of returning to a place, a house, a memory, your parents, a landscape. But returning, as this book has taught me, is not the same as going backwards, because you find things there you didn't experience the first time round or didn't notice, and there are questions you don't necessarily want to answer, and you have to excavate, and it's hard won, and you learn, and there's turmoil, and there's light, and walls are knocked in. This is a book where the walls feel alive with the moments that we've lived in them, and the people before us too. And the past doesn't sit still, and it's dangerous, more dangerous than we remember, but there's also more love there than we ever knew. Okay, I can't paraphrase the book because you can't paraphrase really good poetry. And I'll stop now before I make Rebecca turn bright red before she reads for you. But yes, it's quite the thing. And Rebecca, over to you. Seamlessly. There we go. I'll disappear.
Yeah, bright red and a bit teary-eyed, actually, Caroline. Thank you. But I don't know if I can top that, actually. I don't know if the poem's going to live up wonderful introduction, but we'll talk more later about how you know the book so well and how important you've been. And first of all, I want to say thank you very much to everybody who's here this evening. I'm really excited and also really nervous for some reason. And but I really want to thank the Carcanet team for putting this book together so beautifully for me, and for being really patient, because I got really stressed about the cover and everything else. So I want to thank them for their support and loyalty to me as a poet. And I really like that Carcanet is Latch's home. Thank you. Yes, so I'm going to read a selection of poems from the book this evening, and then maybe have a bit of a chat later. So I'm good to go, Jasmine, with the reading, I think. So Latch is a mixture of many things, like Caroline said. And the first poem in the book, I guess I on purpose wanted to put something a bit different in. I guess I think I'll always be associated with babies and motherhood, and a lot about this book is me pushing myself to write about those subjects I still want to write about, but maybe in different ways, and also try and write about different things. I live in Suffolk, and the hounds for the local hunt are kept 2 fields away from my bedroom window. It's no matter what you think about hunting, and I don't support hunting, but those dogs have got to live somewhere. And it's not uncommon here to hear the hounds wake in the middle of the night. They make the most extraordinary sound. It's not like your neighbour's Jack Russell, you know, kicking off and just yapping a bit. This is the sound of 30 large dogs collectively howling. And my neighbours and I have all agreed that we don't actually dislike it. And I personally, if I wake in the night and don't hear the dogs, I miss them. The hounds. It's as if something calamitous is coming. Their lament rising across fields, its claim on the dawn keeping all the birds silent. I want to know what stirs them, the force of this pack, what causes them to stand, muscled frames trembling, throats full of baleful song. I am wakeful, wrapped and disrupted, their bays sonorous against glass. Should I slide the thin pane, push my upper body into emerging light, let them scent out my sex, tell them we are all afraid? So, oh, this night, this bidding, claws at the latch, pure thunder of them running, my mouth opening to the cool and agitated air. I do touch on grief and sadness in the book. And I did have a really interesting conversation with Caroline about one point about whether I could do that, whether I'd said it once in one book, and could I really say it again? I thought I couldn't. Caroline said I could. And then I wrote Nest. The cygnets draw a crowd before they are born. Mother swan's occasional rise to nudge her ovate crop, beak slow and practiced at the turning. Father swan circling, rearing at dogs. We return to see one, peeping, puff of grey from under her, and the next week come back to find a family gone. One unhatched remaining, its marble lonely in the bowl. Your hand slips out of mine as you bolt to waiting swings, leaving me with the egg and all mothers who lay their babies down, knowing they cannot stay beside them, must lower their own bodies into water and continue with the swim. So there are several poems set on the farm. And when I say a farm, it wasn't like a really proper working farm, but my father basically had this romantic idea that he would move his wife and 4 children to live in the middle of nowhere at this very derelict, rundown place. And it would just all be perfect. And the reality was my mother was stuck at the end of a track with 4 kids under 9. They divorced 3 years later. So they are still together, though, can I say. They kind of decided to remarry each other, but that's another book. So the farm poems in the book come about from my memories, my sister's forensic memory. I set up a little WhatsApp group with my siblings. I'm the eldest of 4, and said, please place your memories here of the farm, of things you can particularly remember. And my sister's memory was incredible. But I also went back. I wrote an old-fashioned letter to the current owner and asked if I could revisit this place that was very formative during my childhood. And I got the loveliest reply saying, yes, Rebecca, please come. You're very, very welcome. And you can just park your car and go and explore, because I really did want to see the outside space again. And but she said, don't knock on my door until you've explored, because I don't want to interrupt your memories, which I thought was really astute of her. The farm. Semi-derelict, ramshackle whimsy of a place. Our father transplanting his family at the end of a track, huddle of empty barns, field after field, no heating. Moving in at New Year, my sister and I in kilts and patent Mary Janes, delivered fresh from the pantomime by Grandma, who slipped our feet into plastic loaf bags fixed at the ankles with elastic bands, waded us through the brown flood that led to the house. Our mother ready, belly swollen with number 4 beds made, no curtains, thickest dark outside. The frequent tipping of us out of the kitchen into barn, meadow, stream with its fluctuating depths. Her trust in the countryside unwavering. Rush of snow deadening the valley, our father attaching sledge to tow bar, each of his children in turn skyrocketing through cold. His erratic presence accepted. Our mother loading us into the car at night in rain, driving 300 yards to get barn-stored coal, cats who never came indoors, 50 hens, dog roaming for bitches. The school bus dropping me at the end of the track, older boys mooning from the rear window, my scarlet shame at their pale arses. Walking in the back door, past our mother, her long phone calls, her crying, children nestled, dirty, barefoot. Her shouting, her transformations, wellies kicked off to wear the night sky on her feet, peep-toe diamante studded heels with bow, the most beautiful things I had seen in my life, the swirl of her black silk Marilyn Monroe dress, her marriage almost over. So while it may have been a tricky time for my parents at the farm, the 4 of us had a ball because we were absolutely feral. That's what I remember about that time. My parents kind of afforded us this rural freedom that, even though I live in the countryside now with my daughter, I'm not sure I'd let her be quite so free. I think I would worry. But Mum just used to say she knew we'd come back when we were hungry. So off we went. And this is about one particular memory and one adventure, and also how I've carried that memory all this time. The pact. Hay, recently harvested, turned to those sweet-smelling blocks, barn stacked almost to the roof, forbidden. Only the dog watched our clamber, taking us to where the swallows come, and up there we leapt and trod the dry bundles, our elevated play. Then one of us was gone, slipped unnoticed into a gap our parents warned us of, how this strawy structure could snatch a boy or girl, and the plummet too great, too narrow to save them. We needed to hear him before we laid our chests at the edge of the hole. My arm voted longest to stab into the deep, a reaching into myth, where I felt his plump hand and heaved, watched his flop into the light. Circled, shaking, we tried to still our breathing, made the necessary promise, headed back to the house and kitchen, mother cooking, the fall a secret held far into our adult lives. Forever haunted by it morphing. The drop deeper, our mother unable to remember what made her look out of the window. Maybe she felt us coming, Or maybe our approaching shadows interfered with the light. Standing at the glass, the smell of leek and potato soup suddenly strong, yet she ignored it simmer to watch her children running. Middle boy screaming. She couldn't hear it, but could tell by the stretch of his mouth. Middle girl behind him, struggling to keep up, glasses loose on her face. Eldest leading the terrible flea, white pump spitting gravel. The barn looming in black behind them, unable to see her youngest boy not with them, her youngest boy not pulled from that warm well. So when I first started writing the book, and some people know this, it's taken me such a long time to write, I really thought it was just going to be about people, not me, for a change. I really thought it was going to be about other people and their connections to the East Anglian landscape, and how they work the land, or their job involves, real manual skill. And I did do that for a bit, but I realized it couldn't sustain the whole book. I wasn't good enough at interviewing people or writing poems about them. But there were two two encounters that I particularly enjoyed and did manage to write poems. And one is spending the day with a blacksmith called John Ball from Framlingham, and this was the result. Blacksmith making. I met a man fluent in the lexicon of spark and watched him stand, forge lit, waiting for the brightest yellow. Brief glares to tell what's buried in the coke. I witnessed steel's blazed compliance in the vice, neared an anvil's kept heat, saw the dips and rust upon its face. I heard the hammers bounce and strike and bounce again, felt myself to be occupied by the chime of it. I held a latch, full of purpose and his thinking. This poem was actually inspired by the retired agronomist's Instagram account. And he and his wife, who I've known for a long time, and they've known me since I was a little girl, he would post these beautiful films of him ploughing the fields and the gulls behind him, and at the same time his wife would post her view walking with the spaniels, where she would take his tea to him in the tractor, and watching their feeds was like watching it all happen in real time. It was lovely. The retired agronomist drives a tractor in the summer because he likes the oily smell of the machine. And how the soil turns to give up its creaturely yield, gulls massing, their swoops to raid each cultivated ridge, and how unchanged it is for bird to follow plough, purest wings dipping down to earth, and how his wife crosses stubble to bring pasta with green beans from the garden, 3 spaniels at her heels, and how this meal is eaten in the tractor's cab after oilseed rape is sown, fruiting, and how we will pass this laboured square, remark the yellow dazzle. So the motherhood bit was always going to get in there. And when we first moved back to Suffolk, I was born here, moved away for 20 years, came back. My daughter was little too, almost 3. And quite early on, I knew that I wanted to write poems about her being here and growing up in the same landscape that I did. But I always envisaged that it wouldn't take me quite so long. And I'd write these poems about this little girl, really, really lovely little thing running around in fields. And anyway, because it took me so sodding long to write, she is now a teenager and up to here. And yeah, we're experiencing all that. So it's funny how the poems kind of morphed a bit really into, I think on the back of the book it says emotional push and pull between mothers and daughters. But yeah, there's a lot of that going on in Latch. And I'm very conscious of her sort of growing being and our changing relationship that we have with our children as they get older. What will it be like to be here? Your future tallness is evident, as we pass on a narrow landing, banister rail low at your hip. Soon you will undress, pulling off clothes, your arms knocking on beams, a ceiling too close for your stretch. This will be all you have known, and I fear it will be too small for you. These walls of wool and daub, not enough to bring us privacy. I do not know how I will love your father at night. Your own secrets a room away, you will no doubt hate it here, for its oldness, for everything it lacks, and I will love it, for the years it gave me, watching you come down steep stairs, a spill of toys from your lap to be met by the dog at the foot. Until you grow to test my faith in jowl posts, your limbs straining at the structure like Alice, head and neck bowed by beams. Neighbors will wonder the magic of you, your hair pouring from a bedroom window, your lips angry at the old cold glass, and I'll be downstairs, my eye level with the bliss of your ankle, my tiny voice calling your name, praying for this timber frame to bear us. We're. Boys coax as she stands at the edge in her underwear, body taut, teenage, the boys' skins wet from already jumping, and she's letting them look at her, knowing the power she has. And we have only just moved to this town, this river new, it's cold unknown, and you are in your buggy, shoes kicking their pink in front of me, and I think how soon it will be before the splash, boys looking at you in the water, breath held, your legs weaving black reeds unfetched. Yeah, this is the Sylvia Plath poem that Caroline kindly mentioned, and it's when I moved back to Suffolk, I've got girlfriends who are here, girlfriends from school who I'm still in touch with, and I found myself kind of driving the lanes again, the lanes that we used to wander at night after being in the pub. And I just, lots of things, I just thought it was actually very comforting being back and heading towards them, those same girlfriends. I really liked that. But I also thought, Lordy, there's no way my daughter is going to be wandering these lanes in the middle of the night after, you know, a little bit relaxed after being in the pub. But it's probably a Suffolk rite of passage to wander a lane at night. And this is my poem all about that. When it feels hot, that rage against me. Will I tell you of the pitch black mile walked with cidery mouths, our hair flushed in occasional headlight, throat singing, sweet child of mine, a distance increasing from men we left at the pub, too old, too frightening when they did react to the early curve of our bodies. My mother elsewhere in the starlit hinterland, just the lane knowing how to hold us, its chorus of night creatures. The collapse into a bedroom, joint a shared firefly at our lips, clothes strewn, soon sleeping like children. I will understand your need to be away from me and with girls. Girls I want to wake now, pull from the men they chose, pull from their tumble-dried sheets, become a multitude storming under stars, sky crackling at the sight of us, all the promises re-rising in our throats, needing each other like fire. I did actually have a little Suffolk gathering to celebrate Latch, just with sort of friends and family and people who've been connected to the book. And I spent some time with a local farmer, and he came along, and it was really interesting because he took me to one side and said, Rebecca, I sat and read your book last night, because everyone who contributed to the book got a complimentary copy. I went and dropped them all off, and he read it twice, and he said he quite liked the poems I'd written about his farm, but he really, really liked Death Watch Beetles, because he felt I'd done some research, he told me, felt I'd done some homework, and for him it summed up everything in the book. And you know, when you have a collection, you kind of have your favourites that you read all the time, and this one was, I guess I not parked it, but I thought, I don't know if I'm going to read this one much. And his comments made me sort of return to it. And I wonder if it does kind of sum up coming back and the reasons my husband and I came back to Suffolk and everything we carried with us and grief and loss and how we're dealing with that here, but how we're doing okay, I think. Deathwatch beetles. Such a distinctive tick to their borings, their collective tiny strengths causing you to poke at what's exposed. Bring me timber crumbs. Your day is one of heft. My arms just able to bear the density of our sleeping child. Her puppet limbs dangle from my hold, whereas you can heave green oak, brook its weight in golden blocks, rid them of the damp they crave with each new pegged splice. Superstition says their presence predicts a death, but death is something we are versed in. Ask us and we will wax lyrical into the night, all nights, about pale rooms that have kept us, how the breath of a child or father or mother or sister can narrow until those rooms release a stillness, pure, almost needed. Lie with me after the moil, and I will tell you their knocking is a call to love. It is not death, but longing. In miniature, many of them spent by morning, speckled upon carpet and our books. Our child collects curled husks, prehistoric in the pink of her palm. You kneel before her fingers, say it's when she's dreaming that they fall to her from beams. And said husband gets a poem, because he's a city boy, born and bred, and I've dragged him to the middle of nowhere, and I thought the least I could do is give him a poem. Stars in a field. I have asked for this county to soften in you, your marrow to swim with its flint and barley, that you learn villages and their styles, since the shadows of churches want stars in a field. Bend to its soils, black and alluvial. Swallow all the coasts, salt in our kisses. Close the cottage door, stay with me behind it. And my last poem, thank you very much for listening, is really about what I have understood about coming back here. That an act of repair has taken place, I think, for my husband and I particularly, and it is good to see my daughter running these fields and thriving, and I've also realized I don't need much now. I am experiencing what it is to feel kind of happy and settled again. I don't need much now, or I want very little. And one of the things where I feel very content and okay is when I'm outside in a field with the dogs and watching my daughter with her cousins, my nieces and nephews. And I just think everything just feels very all right. I can't be more articulate than that, but it really does. Children playing in a Suffolk field. Cousins. They were meant to know each other in this piece of countryside. They were meant to clamber its stiles, show us the fields as they saw them. They were meant to know seasons, conduct fair-headed inspections of bark, coevals at a river's edge. They were meant to know distance and run ahead with the dog. They were meant to know birdsong and bracken and bees. They were meant to know each other, charting these lanes like we did. They were meant to know rain and slow worms, the berries that bleed in a palm. They were meant to climb, my heart tipped, come back down and argue in the race to the ford. They were meant to know rabbits torn opened and a muntjac stare before they vanish into bramble. They were meant to learn tracks and to leave them and to know what it is to be lost. They were meant to know each other. Come to me with a clutch of cow parsley's lace. Thank you, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Caroline.
I mean, I could have just sat here and listened to you read the whole book cover to cover like this. Hiya. So yeah, my first question is just like, obviously you've launched books before, but I know every book launching is different. And what does it feel like to be reading the poems out loud, for them to have left the privacy of your imagination and to be in the air?
It feels, well, I feel a kind of an element of finally, because it took me so long. But I also feel possibly in a way more tentative, maybe even more tentative than the Her Birth ones, which were incredibly explicitly autobiographical and you know, nothing was disguised there. Not that I'm looking to disguise anything here, but I'm slightly tentative, I suppose, about writing about family again, and it's and just those kind of more complex relationships and things like that. So I am pleased, but I'm also a little bit nervous, I think, in reality. Yeah. And my siblings much more kind of like, yeah. about
Because I remember when we were first like talking about these poems, like we kept on trying to find like physical images to describe the work that you were doing, and it was, you know, we talk about floodgates, and I kept saying things like excavation, and you went, no, Caroline, it's not excavation, it's moil. It's moil. I had to quickly look that up, and like, yeah, talk to us about the moil of the process of this book.
I think well, yes, I wanted, well, it's interesting that word, because I wanted the book initially to be about kind of labor, about physical labor and toil, you know, and sweat and energy, you know, invested in the East Anglian landscape. And then I also realized that could apply to relationships and motherhood and family and survival. And, you know, so that's where the book began to expand. And the process of actually getting the book together was such a kind of a bit rocky, really. And for those who don't know, Caroline, I turned to Caroline for some professional help. Yeah, and, you know, and because I needed the book unlocking. And I think I've said that before, you know, you really helped me unlock it, because I got myself very, very stuck. I just didn't know how I was going to widen it. It become a bigger thing, and it was after lots of conversation with you where all the sort of first unlocking happened, and you did actually turn to me and say, you do realize this is actually going to be a very personal book. And it was then that I just kind of, right, okay, and that's when I do feel like a kind of thing, you sort of granted a sort of permission, you know, Rebecca, you can go and talk about grief again, and you can talk about family, and you can, and I suddenly realized that then all the poems were there, they just were kind of bubbling away, but then they all suddenly came out very quickly, but it took ages, and then it all came in a rush.
Yeah, and also, you know, like, you've been very kind to me, but like I would say just a little thing, and then you would go away, and like you would come back with this clutch of a whole new poems where you'd, you know, basically dug into your own heart and then come up to the surface with these brand new amazing poems, and but also there was like you went on kind of like a physical odyssey as well, didn't you? Like,
yeah,
talk about that.
Back to the farm. Yeah, because my siblings were very much, they were split. My brothers were very much like, yeah, whatever, if you want to go back, whatever. Yeah, they weren't that asked really. But my sister was absolutely not. She's the one with the forensic memory, but she was like, never go back, you know, emotionally dangerous, don't go there. Anyway, but I'm really pleased I did. So I did two things. I wrote a bit about the farm before I went back, and then I wrote the letter. And I think because her response also was so encouraging, and you were very encouraging about going back, I did. And it was, it ended up being a very good thing. I had no idea what I would write about. I spent a long time there just walking around the fields and the stream and the place where we used to play. I did go into the house eventually and have a cup of tea, and it was quite changed downstairs. Upstairs was exactly the same. My parents' bedroom was the same, and but I ended up but I'm so pleased I did go back, because I guess there are three particular poems that came from going back, a kind of triptych really, where I reflect upon a woman revisiting her childhood home and what happened there. actually, rather than the poems being very explicitly biographical, this is what it was, autobiographical, this is what it was like at that time, I found myself employing much more like kind of magic or magic realism or not, and every, because I think it was such an intense time then for us all as a family, that for once in my life I didn't want to be explicitly autobiographical about it, really. But going back was really interesting, going to walk around the place.
But that element of magic is also what it gives the impression, and which is true, of the past happening now, like again, but also for the first time. So, I know we talked a lot about the idea of like writing being experience, not the record of an experience, and like every poem in this collection, that an act of discovery took place, and even when going back to the house is not that where you went back and just wrote down the things you could remember already. You went back and you experienced the past in those walls at the same time as the present, and that creates that kind of like there's been a rip in the in the paradigm or whatever, like two worlds, and that leads me on to like, so I remember at one point you saying worrying about whether or not you could have surrealism alongside naturalism, and just listening to that amazing poem you read about, with your limbs stretching through the structure like Alice, like, and how actually just going into that place of magic makes the poem even more true. And my question is, what was that tension between the surrealism and the realism, and how did that dissolve itself?
Well, that felt very new for me, actually, and about wanting to sort of push myself a bit more in this book, and I wasn't quite sure if I could get away with it, and it just, but at the same time I wasn't sort of consciously sitting down saying, right, you're going to write something surreal. I see myself as quite, I don't know what the word is, ordinary poet. I don't know, I can't think. I'm not like, I don't see myself as being, no one would ever say Rebecca Goss is an experimental poet or anything like that. But I personally wanted to see if I could do something a bit different. And the magic comes from, I think also the extreme emotional attachment to things. I almost needed a different way of explaining it, because I didn't want to be this kind of rush of sentimental, over emotional feeling, so when I went back to the farm, there's this poem about, I really, really wanted to see the stream. I've got so many memories of standing in that stream with my siblings when all sorts of stuff was going on, but the poem, I end up stealing the stream and putting it in my car and taking it home and keeping it like a pet. So I just, and I think that is because again, I just wanted to find different ways to not channel, but excavate, that the levels of emotion I was experiencing about looking at my past, I suppose.
Which then, of course, expresses the true natural feeling you're actually having in that moment. You know? And the other thing I want to ask is like, people might sometimes go, "Oh, a book about the countryside. That's nice. Isn't the countryside nice?" Right? But especially with farming, there's so much violence. I mean, my wife grew up on a Devon farm, and she's just constantly telling me about terrible accidents and people run over by tractors, and that simmers under the book as well. Cats falling into vats of tar. About the violence you see.
I was worried that maybe I didn't touch on that enough, actually, the violence of nature and the countryside. But I come from farming family, and all I remember is I don't necessarily have idyllic memories of running around like my uncle's farm or my grandfather's farm. My uncle's farm, particularly, he was a pig farmer. I just remember the fear of God being set into me about where I could and could not go. Do not stand under the silo; it will open. You will drown in a waterfall of feed, and and I was slightly traumatized by all that. They were frightening, scary places. And there's that too. I certainly didn't want to romanticize the countryside, even though I am feeling very happy to be back here.
But also it's like that those flecks of terror in the book are what also activate the love, because you can't have the real love without the terror alongside it. And like something about the chemical reactions between those poems that just makes the love even stronger.
I'm pleased you've said the love, because when I did finally finish the book, and I've talked about my daughter growing up and things, but I did phone my best mate when I finally finished it. I'd handed it in, told you I'd done it, phoned my best mate who is not a poet, and I just said, and I remember crying down the phone to her saying, I just think my daughter, Molly, she's going to pick up this she's going to pick up the book when she's 25 and she's just going to think that I never loved it. And it's just not true at all. It's the exact opposite of that. But my girlfriend said very consolingly that if I'm doing anything, I'm just telling it like it is. I do want to do that about motherhood, I think. And that it's, that it's complex a bit. Yeah, that it's complex, but the love is really there. It is really there, I hope.
It really is.
I hope you see this video.
I've got a few questions from the floor.
Okay, thanks, Caroline.
Michael Smith he asks, how much invention do you allow yourself within the memories? Are you revisiting or revitalizing in a Wordsworthian spirit?
Oh, that's very interesting. I am not, I didn't really want to invent. I wanted to change my way of presenting the memory, I suppose, like we talked about magic and things, but I didn't want to invent things. So like in the barn, we really did nearly lose my little brother in that stack of bales. And so it's not so I've tried not to disguise or hide in that way, but I didn't set out to make anything up, as in, what do I want to say? Just fool anyone. I don't want to fool anyone in there. Yeah.
But then, as you said, you mentioned your sister and her forensic memory, and like obviously, there's not like a set thing, like factual thing that necessarily happened, like that everyone's got on tape. Do you know what I mean? But like, and so memory is always you have to kind of take a risk to decide like that was it because I remember it, don't you?
Yes. Yeah, to believe in, her forensic detail I was grateful for, but also to believe in my own memory and how I felt then, to believe in that and hope that comes across.
Yeah, that's really memory is as an act of belief in itself. Laurie Donaldson asks, do you think you are getting more experimental in terms of form and style?
Well, there was a review of Girl, my last book, that said that basically I should ditch the couplet, and I admit that I have been in the past pathologically addicted to my couplets. So I thought that was completely fair. And I think then maybe when it came to form, I did think with the next poems, just push yourself a bit and realize that the poems I enjoyed reading, they were doing interesting things. And I just thought, yeah, you could just try and just try, Rebecca, but also not try for the sake of trying, just actually understand that maybe this material was also new. This book is something different. I'm saying something different. I'm writing in a different way about things, about, emotional subject matter, but writing about it differently. So it warranted a different kind of form at times. So I'm very, very gradually, slowly, maybe experimenting a bit more.
It's also like finding the right body for the spirit of that particular poem, isn't it? Like that, the poem about the that ends with the line about your youngest son not pulled from that warm well. It makes sense that poem feels like something you could get lost in, that has a vast a denseness to it on the page, and this but you've got couplets in your first poem, and that really works.
Yeah.
That really works because it's about hounds, that are contained, training the hounds in the couplets. Thea Smiley, great name, says, so brave to go back to the farm. What was the biggest surprise?
Oh, well, first of all, I discovered that I was trespassing hugely because the boundaries have all changed in the decades since I lived there. So I was just rocking through gates and into fields because that's what I remembered. I was surprised that much of it was unchanged. And another thing, the lovely thing that the owner said to me was how she asked me specifically, are there any trees you remember and want to see again? And funnily enough, the kind of the farm land was got bookended by 2 oaks. And I saw one at the start of the track, but I couldn't get to the far one because of the new boundary. And but she went out and photographed it for me and sent it to me after I'd been, which was really lovely. So I had pictures of that tree. But I think, I wasn't, I was actually quite comforted by how a lot of it was unchanged, considering how long ago it was. I was 9 when I lived there, that I could see the same oak, I could see the same tree, I could see the same field. Yeah, I liked that.
And then Simon Lamb says, does the subject nature of each poem, he says, you might have just answered this question, but as we know, there's always more to say. Does the subject nature of each poem find the poetic form you write in, or do you decide to write in a certain form and then fit the subject into that form? So yeah, do you pick?
I think they're both kind of happening at the same time, really. I don't think I set out to, I think it just kind of happens. I'm sorry, I can't say anything more exciting than that. I think it just, you just kind of instinctively know whether something has got to be very dense like that on the page or not. And there's a poem where things are much more spread out, which I don't do a lot in my work, but that's a poem about kind of fear and vulnerability and me trying to cling on to my siblings because we're scared and excited at the same time. So yeah, I guess I was thinking about it a bit more, but I like to think it all happens at the same time.
And do you find, like, because often with your line breaks, which I just adore, like there is a kind of almost like a physical nature to them, like you've put your ear to the page to kind of like listen to it, like when you've got and what is it, and how the soil turns to give way to its, what is it, creaturely
Yield? No, is it?
Yeah. And how the soil turns to give up its creaturely yield, right? And you have the line break on the creaturely, right, which then gives it and like there is a kind of like an act of labor and of closeness and of physicality in finding those line breaks, or at least that's how it reads. Is that how you feel when you're writing it?
Yeah, and yes, well, thank you. That's quite a nice observation. But yeah, and also I think I'm still a poet who is quite fixated on brevity, really. I don't write, I mean, these feel long poems for me. They feel like whoppers and going over the page. They really do. So because I do like the short poem, really. So I think, then I would be paying attention to where the line break is, because there aren't very many words there anyway. So not only have they got to count, they've got to work. And they've got to do the right work.
Yeah, like you've got this like small like surface area and everything has to I have another question. So the book is dedicated to your parents. How do you feel when you were writing the book? Did you feel like you met your parents in different ways through the writing of it?
I do. I think even though it was possibly risky writing it, and they've been quite nervous about it, I think. I don't think it's come out as bad as they thought it would. And I actually wanted to write it for them, I think. I wanted to write it for them because I think it's easy for them to look back, like we all do. Now, I'm an older parent with teenagers and older kids, that you think that everything that happens to them is as a consequence of your behavior. And of course, your parents impact your whole life. But I think I also wanted to write this book to show, there was that time and there is this time, and you've got the 4 of us now and we're okay. You've still got the 4 of us and we're okay. And, and I wanted to, I didn't ask permission. I didn't, I kind of told them, kept them informed what I was doing. But my main thing was about writing the book for them, really. Yeah.
I think I kind of meant like met them
Sorry.
in ways in your head. Like,
Oh, how I met them in my head.
yeah. I don't always articulate my
Sorry,
strange.
Caroline.
But that I enjoyed that answer too, which I would ask as well. But yeah.
Did I meet them in my head? Yeah, when I went back to the farm, they were just there like 3D. Yeah, and there is a poem where I just basically I'm wandering through the house and they're there. I'm not in the present. I'm absolutely in the past. It was like filmic. It was like my parents from the 80s were just walking alongside me, and I really felt that as a physical. That was almost an actual thing that happened. I was talking to this new owner, and suddenly I was back in like 1984.
You talked about that bit. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
Go on.
It was just that you talked about that bit where suddenly the poems just started going out of you, and like as if they were happening to you, and but obviously that you had to do all the work leading up to that point in order, for suddenly the poems to start happening like a 3D haunting around you, and you just write it down as quick as you could.
It was a bit like that. They did, honestly, I hadn't written a thing, not a sodding thing for over 2 years. And then I wrote 30 poems in 6 months, just like that. And I really enjoyed that though. It was great. I don't know if I recommend it. 2 years of being miserable and hating yourself, and then 6 months of thinking, oh, I can do it after all.
Leah Brooks asks, what's your writing process? Do you set a time for writing each week, or do you scribble ideas down regardless of surroundings?
A lot of scribbling, a lot of storing poems in my head, a lot of writing in my head on dog walks and in other parts of my life. I do a lot of that now. But I am not one of these who has set times. I don't know what it would be like if my life could be structured like that. I don't know what I'd produce. I wonder if when the poems do come, it's because I've managed to fit in this time and I'm going to really value it. So I make it productive. And I think that's what happens.
And although somehow in my head, when you're writing, you're always like in a courtyard, like eating a pear, someone and everyone's, and you've just been like, you're just surrounded by paper like all day. Like that's how I imagine. Kaylee asks, did you write your poem published for the Plath Prose specifically in relationship to Plath, or did that connection come afterwards?
I think, if I'm being truly honest, that connection came afterwards when I saw the prize and saw the advert for the prize, and it had the themes, it was mothers and fathers and nature, and it did lots of things that I felt the collection was addressing, but it didn't, but it also felt right, maybe, that there was that Plathian connection. So it just felt, I don't enter a lot of competitions, but I just had a really gut instinct with that one that I wanted to enter it, and then I forgot all about it, but I just thought I really want to enter that one. Yeah.
And I've got one more question from Simon, which I'll combine with the last question I wanted to ask you as well. So he asks, you mentioned, I like how he words this, you mentioned that the book took a long time to write. Was there ever a time when you thought, shit, this is never going to end? Or did it find its natural ending when you felt this is done? And then on top of that, I was going to ask you about the ordering of the book, which, I'm obsessed with, and and how that came about.
Well, yes, I did. Once then I finally got going, I did think, how am I going to end it? And that became a bit of a problem. Because I think there were various versions and various endings, and I think they were dangerously steering towards the sentimental, really, or the much more predictable. Like, I'm here in Suffolk, and isn't it obvious that act of repair has taken place, the end, and I realized I didn't really want that. I like a book's ending to maybe suggest that there is more to come, or that things are still moving after you've left it, and I think that's in the end what I wanted. And you did really help with that, Caroline, especially the order, about not putting it in an order that I would sort of expect my readers to expect. This is what a Rebecca Goss collection should look like. And then how about just completely disrupting that and seeing what it could look like? And I think I very much went with the latter process, guided by you. And I think the book is possibly more interesting for it. So thank you.
Right, well, I have to, someone should ask another question because you're not allowed to, oh, thank goodness, because you're not allowed to end by talking about me. Right, right, I'm going to...
And John McAuliffe helped me very much with the last poem, like massively.
Great. So Christian asks, oh, this is nice. This is a nice one to end with. What is this beautiful place around you?
Well, here or the landscape?
I think they mean just literally around your head. Yeah. Where?
Oh, okay. This is my spare bedroom, and if I was to turn the camera ever so slightly that way, there'd be a whole pile of chaos, including and washing and laundry and Rebecca's real life over there. But this little corner, it's my little poetry corner of yeah, lucky to have artists in the family and paintings and books and beams, and this is the one little corner I keep for myself. The rest of it is boom.
I like that as a description for a poem as well. Like if you just turn the camera slightly, the whole pile of chaos.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And yeah, I am obsessed with this book, and I hope everyone needs to buy it at least once. And thank you all for coming. Jazz, where are you? There you are.
Hello.
Hey, thank you guys so much. This hour went so quickly. Sometimes it just passes so quickly. I read this book, obviously, and I did not expect to feel so emotional during your reading. So yeah, thank you so much. It was really, really beautiful.
Can I just very quickly say thank you to everyone who's put things in the chat, because I can see that there are lots of comments. I haven't looked at a single one because I get really stressed with the chat box. So I think Jasmine's going to send it to me later, but if you have said something, then thank you very much, and thank you. I will read them later.
Yes, I am going to send that to Rebecca because it's been so cool to read your messages this evening. It's been like, honestly, my heart is singing this evening. I have put the link in the chat for you to buy the book. As I said earlier, it'll come as an email, so check your emails tomorrow, buy your discounted copy for everyone you know, please. That's what we want. So congratulations, Rebecca, and thank you, Caroline. It was like great to have you here hosting that conversation. The last thing for me to say to you guys is please join us again. Our next launch is next week, a week today on the 14th. We're launching a new collection by Michael Edwards. That's in the chat. Go to our website, sign up for our newsletter, and you'll get all the info. So that's everything. I'll leave the chat open for a couple more minutes so you can like get your last minute messages in there. But yeah, thank you again and congratulations.
Thank you.
And good night.
Thanks everyone. Good night. Thank you.